we're gonna figure out the LA Clippers, right? So they made the big trade with James Harden. I know what I think about that trade. The whole world's shared what they think about it. Not many people are high on it, feel they have the potential I think they have, but I'm gonna go to y'all first. So Lou, we're not really gonna talk about the development of guys here because that's not where this team is. They kind of have to do something at this point. So what do they have to do to reach the goal they want to reach?
I don't know, man. I think this team is super, super interesting. It's a very polarizing team because, people were, they started off, they lost 4 games. To me, that's irrelevant. It's the first 4 games Harden has played all year. It really comes down to how much are these guys willing to sacrifice? Yeah. That's kind of what I view it as. How much are they willing to give up and how much are they willing to put their egos to the side and then on the other end get after it? And I'm not saying that they haven't done it. I actually think it's been quite the opposite. I think the last game they played against the Rockets, Harden specifically, he was guarding point of attack almost the whole game. I don't think Harden's done that since he was in OKC, if I'm being very honest. But it's just things like that, makes me I guess a little bit higher on this team than I feel like everybody else is. Like just the sheer talent, man. Their ability, like these are all players who one way or another, they've been the guy on their team. Yeah. And now you have 4 players who have always been the guy on their team. Is one season enough time to maybe, who knows, that's the interesting part. But they're all, not only were they the guy on their team, they're all like incredibly high IQ basketball players. Yeah. Like it's not like we're talking about players who all their only job was to score. Right. Harden's job was literally to run, like he ran the greatest offense we had seen up until that point. Yeah. Like he was the greatest one-man engine during the regular season that the NBA has seen. I have to add that in there. But it's true. Like Westbrook obviously as well, super high IQ guy. Can we talk about like Kawhi and Paul George? Like we know what they are, two-way phenoms. It's just how much are they willing to gel and who's going to be the 5th guy with them? Because I don't know if the answer is on this roster, and that's no disrespect to Zubac. I think he's a very good backup big. It's just I don't know if he fits their play style at this current moment. But man, this team is. I think this is the most polarizing team in the NBA. 100% bar none.
Frankie, what do you got on? What do you think the Clippers have to do?
Man, I'm still interested in them because like I see some of the vision. But like you talked about Lou, you talked about PG and Kawhi, and like they're both great on and off ball guys. So and shout out to Kawhi. I want to give him a shout out first. He's played all 11 games. Yeah, like what? That's crazy. It's such an accomplishment for Kawhi, but it's great to see him on the court and healthy and like being able to play through whatever bumps and bruises he gets along the way. And he's still playing really well too. But it's just a balance because Harden has never really been that guy off the ball. Right. And that's been a problem. He's never been a relocator. He's never been a catch and shoot guy.
Definitely not a cutter.
And not a cutter. And he's never, and it's not even that he wasn't efficient at it. He's just been unwilling to do all those things. He's not a screen away guy. He doesn't do anything off the ball. He stands and waits. He's not ready, not a threat. And it's for such a dynamic offensive weapon to just be nothing off ball. It's like it's such a waste. Yeah. And here, like he's playing, he's played a lot with fucking stars and Hall of Fame talents, Hall of Fame players, guys in their prime. And now like he has to like really adjust to this team. And they've had some early struggles. And shout out to Russ for willing to take one for the team and come off the bench. But I'm still really confused on the pieces, man. I personally would have really liked if they had been able to keep a Batum or a Covington. I feel like those are glue guys at the big wing spot that could really help. But we'll see how they go. I'm really curious. I think Ty Lue is a good coach. Yeah. I know he has segments of the Clippers fan base that really can't stand him.
That's every fan base though.
That's every fan base. Every fan base. I see Warriors fans that hate her. There's Heat fans that don't believe in Spo. Yeah. So it's everywhere. But this team is interesting. And but I still don't know what the sum of these parts can be.
Yeah, I'm a little bit with both of you. I do feel like the backlash they've gotten is kind of like, I wouldn't say uncalled for necessarily, because there are questions for this team, but I don't think they'll be half as bad as people think they will be.
Yep.
But at the same time, I do still have my questions. But they did answer my first question, right? Because every time like you get these star players that come together, the difference between that working and not working has been somebody demoting themselves to be a role player, right? So when we look at Chris Bosh in Miami, taking a back seat and going from, he was still an all-star in Miami, but just not taking as many shots and like becoming a better defender. We look at that. When we look at what's the other example? Well, Golden State's a little different because they just have, I don't want to necessarily call Draymond and Clay role players, but they are guys who never really needed the ball.
Stars in their roles.
Well, Draymond needs the ball to set up other guys. And Clay, he's not even going to dribble. He's just going to launch it, knock it down. And Steph Curry, as great as he is on ball, he's probably better off ball. Right. And so to put a KD, it was a lot easier because it's not necessarily guys making themselves role players. It's just being stars in a role and not demanding the ball. With this Clippers team, that's my question. Every time stars come together, but with the Clippers team, I was like, who's going to be the guy to do it? And Russell Westbrook volunteered to come off the bench. And so that's a step in the right direction. So there is some organization. It looked a lot different in that Rockets game. We saw James Harden kind of break out and have a signature James Harden game. And so I think it remains to be seen with them. Unfortunately, health is a factor in basketball. I wish we could turn injuries off, but they aren't the most durable roster. So hopefully everything goes well on that end. But there's just a lot of question marks in general with this team, specifically that. And that's what it has been over the past few years.
I do, to your credit, I thought specifically the last game against the Rockets, I thought Harden looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think it's understated how much he was getting to the rim.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing Zubac does do very well for him is set screens. Yeah. He's a very good screener, so he's able to just create that little bit of leeway. I do think they're not shooting as many, like this whole like I know it's been popular on Twitter, like, oh, they're passing up open threes. I still think they're doing some of that. Yeah. Like they're pumping and just waiting for the guy and trying to do something, and it's not there. And you look up and there's 5-6 seconds and you have to force up a shot. But I thought the last game, the process was a lot better. Throughout the course of the game, Kawhi was more so just picking his spots. I thought Paul George started off good and then kind of got a little funky, just kind of forcing. Credit to Dylan Brooks for actually, making him force some of those shots. But I'm super interested to see what this team looks like. And I know this is going to sound ridiculous when somebody like Mason Plumlee comes back, because I don't think
it's not ridiculous at all.
Yeah, it's somebody who, for better or for worse, he can catch lobs, something that Harden has historically always had. And, that's kind of his bread and butter, is being able to facilitate his big men off the pick and rolls and stuff like that. I'm very curious as well. The last thing I will state is how much of a role does Russell Westbrook have off the bench?
Right.
Because this last game, he was, he wasn't really doing much, to be very honest. Like, in terms of like, he wasn't being asked to do much. He was kind of being asked to be a spacer. And I don't think that's him in his best set, but I'm curious to see how much freedom and leeway he has to start operating and getting to the rim. He did shoot 4 free throws in 17 minutes, so that's always good.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what do you guys think specifically? Do you think this bench unit now with Westbrook is enough to hold this team above water when some of those guys do end up getting hurt or sitting? Or like, basically, do you think the depth can hold this team up?
I honestly don't think so. I don't think, especially if you're missing a Paul George or a Kawhi, things get a little murky. And you could give Russ his own unit, and I understand Russ is still a good player to me. Like, I know the Lakers run was bad, but he's still productive in my eyes. But I don't know if it's going to be enough, like, because there's different standards with different teams for what they're trying to do.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's enough. If they were just trying to get to the second round or whatever it is, then of course. But for them to try to win a championship, I don't know if like they can't afford to lose Paul George or Kawhi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, the last game, PJ Tucker stuck out like a sore thumb. Still just not willing to shoot, not really doing anything out there. He competes, he tries, and I miss seeing him in Miami because it hurts seeing him what he's become after this. But he played 15 minutes, was a minus 24, had 0-0-0-0 across the box score, only put up 3 personal fouls. Like he's just not what they need out there. He doesn't really fit as that athletic wing that they would ideally use. Like, you talked about a rim runner for Harden. I'm interested in like the 2-man units of what they're going to do. Because, Russ has played with PG and Harden before.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering to see who, obviously you can all stagger a Harden and Russ, but you could also play them together. And they had a lot of success in Houston. And Russ had a lot of individual success. So you can use him off the ball as a screen guy, as like, the power guard that him and Bruce Brown have famously done. So there's some things to do. Norman Powell's still a really solid contributor off the bench. But after that, they picked up Daniel Tice. But I don't know how good he can be in that role. He's not really a rim runner. He's like a high post hub kind of guy. He can dunk, but it's not really a lob threat kind of guy.
Yeah. And I do want to kind of expound on something you mentioned, because they did use Russ a lot last year as a roller. And that was very effective for him, but they didn't have somebody who can run a pick and roll like James Harden last year.
Yeah,
and so I do think that's going to unlock a lot of stuff for him. And so I'm interested to see more of that. They did a little bit of it against the Rockets, but I do want to see them kind of. That's what they can do if they're missing Paul George and Kawhi. They can kind of go to that. I don't know if it's going to get them enough to reach the expectations they have for themselves and for what anybody probably should have looking at the roster. Yeah. But I think that is gonna kind of help them out. Lou, you had something?
No, I was just gonna state, with Russ being a screener and stuff like that, the whole thing. Why I do think Zubac, he is kind of important for this team, even though I don't think he's the right person, is because when Zubac is there, that they're not switching that because he is at least big enough to go down there, but the Kawhi screens to Harden can be switches. Same for Paul George. Same for Russell Westbrook. So how much can this offense facilitate out of that and just actually attack these mismatches? And how much do you trust these people doing that consistently for 82 games and whatever it takes in the playoffs?
Right. Yeah. And I think with the Clippers at the end of the day, and it's unfortunate because just looking at the roster over the years, even when they had the Patrick Beverleys and all that, you want me personally, because there's people who Paul George is also a very polarizing player, to be completely honest. James Harden I don't even think polarizing at this point. He's just not liked.
Bingo.
Only by humble Tej.
He's pretty disliked. And Russell Westbrook, same thing. He's more disliked than liked. But for me personally, I at this point, I'm gonna be completely honest. Up until a couple of years ago, I did have players I didn't like, and James Harden was near the top of that list. But there's just a certain amount of talent that I just can't deny, and I'd rather not deprive myself of enjoying the game in that way. Yeah, and so for me,
welcome. I feel like as a Heat fan, I'm one of the few people who's always enjoyed watching James Harden because
yeah. I just don't want to deprive myself of enjoying the game in that way anymore. But it's just unfortunate that there's still all these question marks about this team.